Welcome back to the second part with our former ambassador from Uganda, former ambassador from Liberia, foreign service person who has done more than 40 years and continues to change the world. Right now, serving on different organizations, doing so much work in this world, settled in, but not completely done. We thank you so much for making time again. Thank you for coming back for the second part of this conversation. We are going to go back to your 40 years of this diplomat work. Throughout your career, you have had mentors, people who influenced you in the work area. We know your dad and mom and the home environment was also a huge influence. I got to meet you through Edward Brain, who actually taught you in the Foreign Service School and whose son, Edward Brain, he doesn't call him junior, Ted Brain worked for Nyaka as a chief operating officer, as a board member, as a treasurer. Thank you, Ted. And thank you, Mr. Edward, for introducing us to uh, Deborah Malac, former ambassador to Uganda. At the time, she was ambassador to Uganda. Please speak to our audience and to the people who are listening, the role of mentorship. I know you mentor so many, more than you can take on, and you have had mentors of yourself beyond mom and dad at home.
Well, I have to say, partly because of the era in which I grew up in the early part, during the women's liberation movement, if you will, and going into an institution like the Foreign Service, which was heavily male dominated.
Yes.
When I joined the Foreign Service in 1981, back in the dark ages, there were not that many women. And so it was a very difficult environment because there were a lot of men who didn't believe that women should even be in the Foreign Service, right? But because of that sort of mindset and the time in which I grew up, I was one of these in the early part of my career who thought, okay, I have to be twice as good as every man. I can't ask for help. I can't look for guidance. I just need to do my job and do it well. And so there were people even early on in my career who offered advice and offered to be a mentor, but I was foolish enough or too foolish to understand that I actually needed that advice and that guidance. So I struggled for a number of years in my professional life without mentors, not understanding that it is not a sign of weakness to not so much ask for help, but to ask for guidance or to just have a board or someone who can share the way in which they've solved problems or addressed a particular challenge. So it took me a while to realize that it was okay to do that. And I was very fortunate as I moved through my career to have a number of supervisors, both at sort of my sort of immediate supervisors, as well as big bosses, if you will, who took an interest in me in some particular way in terms of some aspect of my work or giving me advice about career development, types of skills that I needed to have. And as I progressed through, not only did I realize as I was moving up that I needed and I had an obligation to mentor others, to reach back and help not just women, but in particular women, but others who were coming through. So I was late coming to this concept of mentorship and the importance of mentorship. But I got there eventually, and I was very fortunate to have a number of people that I watched very carefully, because I think this is where it becomes important, is as you move on to a leadership journey, right? So there's the issue of career or work, or having mentors to help you develop skill sets and figure out how what you want to do with your life. But as you move into a much more of a leadership journey to figure out how you become more fully evolved as a true leader, it's really important to have role models, to have people you can seek advice from, people that you can learn from. Even when you're learning, I don't want to be like that person. This is not good behavior. And so I think it's very important for everyone to look for those opportunities for learning. And that mentoring moment or that mentor may only be a mentor for a very brief period in your life. Others will be ones that accompany you for many, many years or many months or many miles on your journey. But that doesn't mean in that 10 minutes that you come across somebody, you might not be able to learn something. So I think it's, keeping yourself open for the opportunity, and not being shy to ask for someone to be a mentor, to provide some advice. And again, you don't have to have a lifelong relationship with that person. It can be something that you can use and learn from in the moment, because you, as a leader, you can't believe you have all the answers. And I had a very, I had, like many people, I had a bumpy leadership journey, and there are things I wish, looking back, I could go back and change or done differently. But what I do think I did is really start to be more self-aware and know where I needed to improve and why something didn't work. And some of that comes about from having mentors. Some of it comes about from a lot of self-reflection. And so those are very important, I think, very important for folks as they move through their lives.
Very, 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 very good. And to those of you who are watching us, we all have mentors. We are mentors ourselves, and you as mentees who we are mentoring, do endeavor also to pass it on and mentor somebody, because most of us are pathfinders. You open the path, but then we don't want you to struggle the same way we struggle to get into. Women who are in foreign services now are sailing through because many of you opened the way for them to be able to do this. Let's talk about, you have done your bouts of all these travels, all this diplomacy work, all this foreign service, and time came, you finished your term in Uganda, you traveled back to United States, but they always say where the flood has passed, you always have an interest to know what's going on. Right now, Uganda is celebrating 62 years of independence. Last week, we had interesting tweets going through. This question is tied into the role of technology in today's diplomacy. It happened before anybody actually runs to what is happening in Uganda. I want us to go back to what happened in our elections here in the United States with the technology influence, where robots were sending tweets over and over during Hillary Clinton and President Trump. We are not going to go so deep in that. We don't want this conversation to be labeled as a political conversation. Last week, we had interesting tweets that touches Uganda and United States, where somebody gave the ambassador of United States in Uganda, who I have met, Ambassador Pope, an ultimatum to leave the country within. Sounded like Idi Amin when he gave ultimatum to the Indians. In diplomatic circles, is this something that happens that somebody can just wake up and say, go away, we don't need you anymore? If I can wake up one day, or somebody who is the head of the army in Uganda and say, Ambassador, leave. Is that protocol? Is that how it is done? I think the
Well,
public.
from a truly diplomatic perspective, that's not how it's done. Certainly, we serve ambassadors not only at the pleasure of the president by whom appointed, but they also have to, they are guests in the host country, and the government that's receiving you as the ambassador has to have confidence and respect for your position. Maybe not you as an individual, but certainly for the position. And so there are very, clear diplomatic protocols. If you do wish to send someone out, to declare them persona non grata, the host government has the right, ultimately under diplomatic rules and practices, to do that. It's not used as frequently as people seem to believe, and it usually means that there's some, the government grievance that they believe, and they're making a political point, right? But there's a formal process, and that has to come through the foreign ministry in the form of a very clear official message, not in a tweet.
X.
I mean, it's just a tweet or a post on some other media is not sufficient, and it has to come through official government channels, which would be, the president, the prime minister, the foreign ministry. And that was not the case in this instance.
This was not the case in this instance. I also remember when you introduced me to Ambassador Brown, who served also years in Uganda, and introducing me to Ambassador Pope. Again, happy independence to our country, Uganda, 62 years later. After your service in Uganda, I thought you were retired. You're going to go home with your grandchildren and your husband and settle down. You are serving on Nyaka board. We are going to talk about your travel to Nyaka. But then all of a sudden, Deborah Malac is at United Nations. What happened to?
Well, that was just a brief, request from the Department of State to help them out and to help at our U.S. mission in New York. During the General Assembly every year, there's a lot of extra work that goes on because there are many resolutions and issues being discussed at the General Assembly. And our mission to the United Nations in New York always needs extra hands. And so I was asked to help out during the General Assembly in 2022. And I was happy to do that, sort of with responsibility for African countries, and had the opportunity to meet with a number of representatives from countries across sub-Saharan Africa, which was, was fun to see some people and to meet some new people. But that was, it's just a short-term assignment that I agreed to take on. But for the most part, I'm trying to avoid getting back into anything too official. I like being able to speak my mind a little bit more.
Wonderful. Speak your mind, but also you are passionate about all the things we talked about above, but women rights, girls' rights, healthcare have been at the forefront, and human rights of your work. I remember when we met the first time in your office, the first thing that surprised me was you cannot take your cell phone to meet the ambassador. Leave the cell phone outside. We get in and you go, actually, I don't bring my cell phone also to meet the ambassador. I mean, to be in my own office. And I asked a brave question. I said, as an ambassador or former ambassador, can you serve on the board? And he said, ask me that question when I am done with my duties. I am so thankful that you considered and you have served on the Nyaka board over these many years and brought this experience that many of our board members who are mostly located in the United States don't get. But you also told me at the time I had just met Raj, Dr. Raj, who was working in Liberia village, who does last mile health and has done so well, has gone in Biden administration and done an amazing, fantastic job. We know so many other people who are doing this. Tell us a little bit about serving communities even after you are done with your diplomatic work. This is to encourage other diplomats. So they
Well, I think all of us,
wow.
obviously, when people retire from the diplomatic service, they're at different phases of their life, right? Some people, either because of their age, are young enough where they want to go or feel, they haven't worked for 40 years already and they feel like they want to be far more heavily engaged on a more regular basis. Others of us who've, I put in my 40 years. I'm ready to be less at the beck and call and have a little more control over what I do with time. But I think all of us, for the most part, because of the fact that we have spent so much of our time moving around the world, moving into new societies, into new cultures, new environments, that we want to remain engaged or find ways that are meaningful to us. And so I want to stay connected to Africa because for me, I have spent so much of my adult life on the continent or working on behalf of the continent that it is very much an integral part of me. And so serving on the board of NIACA, serving on the board of the Sirleaf Presidential Foundation keeps me connected, at least in some small way. I would love, COVID put a big dent, I think, into everyone's life in terms of, disrupting plans for how I thought certainly my retirement would unroll. But that was also why it was wonderful because the opportunity to work on the NIACA board, to join the Sirleaf Presidential Foundation during COVID, at least kept me connected at a time when it really wasn't possible to travel. It wasn't possible to go back and explore more or see friends on the continent. But I also, I very much, because I have spent so much of my life looking outward, sort of in the foreign policy arena, the development arena, I've also been looking for ways to become globally, right? Domestically, with domestic issues, politics to a certain extent, but because there are things and issues like most Americans, I'm concerned about here at home as well. So I think it's not unusual to find former Foreign Service, former ambassadors still engaged in many different ways, either in their local communities or working with global affairs, councils in the areas where they work, or being even more internationally engaged. We're all a little bit different. We all have different interests, but I think it's something that helps keep our minds active and also speaks to that need for doing something and change every few years. I get itchy feet, I can't do something for too long and then I want to go to a new place or do something new because that's sort of the way I'm wired.
Ambassador, I am so glad you visited Nyaka during your term in Uganda. You are the first, and so far, the only one who went all the way to Kanungu to Nyaka and met our grandmothers and the children. We have so many good memories of you doing that. We intend to take Ambassador Pope there too. But last year, I spent a year at Harvard University. one of the senior fellows in our program was Katuna from Georgia, who talked about this whole landscape of men diplomats when she started. Things have changed now, and she would be the only woman who is standing with men in a picture over and over and over. And I did introduce you to Katuna. Katuna is from Georgia. She was an ambassador of Georgia to United States. And she said the only reason I started wearing pantsuits was to stand with all those men. And I'm the only woman doing it. There are so many young women who are looking at this interview going, I want to be like Deborah. I want to do more work. But you've already talked about how to do it and how to go about it. I want to go back to Harvard. While I was at Harvard, in JFK, Kennedy School, which is the diplomat school that teaches government, hangs a picture of President Sir Johnson Sirleaf, the first African female president on the continent of Africa. Mm-hmm. You are the chair, or you served as the chair of her foundation. Please educate the public what the foundation does and the amazing fundamental work you have done with women leaders who want to be diplomats through the foundation and through the President's Salary Foundation. I've never Sally, but I have so much respect. Her picture is right there. Every time I was sitting there, I was like, I know the chair of the board. Thank you for doing this. May our girls, I have twin girls, Talia and Tessa. And
I had the amazing opportunity, obviously, to serve as ambassador to Liberia when President Sirleaf was in office during her second term in office. And so that connection and that relationship has continued. And that's one of the reasons I was asked to serve on the board. Now, the foundation is really just the charity arm in the U.S. or the center. President Sirleaf's vision is to help through the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Center for Women and Development in Monrovia to create a location and a way to foster the next generation of senior public female leaders across the continent of Africa. So there are several ways they are doing this. We're in the process of raising money to build a presidential library and center in Monrovia. It will be the first presidential library for a female president anywhere in the world, first of all, because they don't exist anywhere else. Hopefully that'll change even in the U.S. at some point. And then to create what's being called the Africa Women's House, which will be a place for convening, for working, for really identifying those women who are already well along in their leadership journey, but need that additional assistance and mentorship through contact with a network of people like President Sirleaf and Dr. Ngozi, who's at WTO, to help them understand needed to get to that next level, to create the fortitude that they need to get to confront the male chauvinism, the obstacles to women in political in Africa, to governance, to leadership. And so it's an exciting process. They have a flagship program called the Amuje program, where they identify cohorts of women every year. And in fact, their applications are open at the moment, have just opened for the next cohort of Amuje leaders for women to apply. I would encourage people to go and look into that you can find it at the center's website. That gives an opportunity to be part of this group of now about 45, 50 women from across the continent of Africa, of north, south, east, and west, who are already leaders in their own right, some cases, members of parliament, a couple of mayors. We have people who are leading you have been ministers. So there's a whole mix of people, but it's an exciting way to watch more women move up through the ranks, because I know even from my time served in various countries in Africa, that the challenges that women face, even very talented, competent women, they confront huge obstacles just in political party formations within their own governments. It takes a lot of work for them to overcome the patriarchy, the societal pressures, all of those things. So it's been rewarding to have a very, very small part in that, and to watch and meet some of these incredible women. I've met hundreds of women across the continent over the course of my career, and they are all very inspiring. They're from local level up to national level and international level. And we know so much, there's so much potential there, and they have so much to bring to the table. And I'm also a strong proponent that not just in Africa, but across the globe, we need more women in leadership positions. We need more women in charge of governments, because it will make a difference. We have many, many problems to solve, and we just need to get more women into positions so they can actually get some things done.
Oh my God. We need more women, more men, more youth, more young people, more people, but especially women. I have such a passion for women. Goes back to what I watched my mother go through, but also my mother who advocated against her life for all of us to go to school. And here we are having these conversations. Here we are, mother, father, all these many 23,000 women who are doing so much. We have recognized that the women who are in Nyaka programs, including the same ones you took a picture with, are now contesting for government positions on the board. Without their financial, economic empowerment, without the baskets they started making and eventually become chairperson, secretary, now they are on a local committee, they would not have contested for a position to be the local council 1 or local 2. One of them told their granddaughter, you should be a youth leader. And the granddaughter who went to Nyaka is now Kanungu District Youth Speaker.
Oh, wonderful.
So these women are now not just economic, not just physical, not emotional. They have become leaders of their own. One of them spoke at Harvard University and met Katuna. And Katuna said, I never thought in my life a grandmother would be such a huge advocate to the point where they come and stay at Charles Hotel and speak at Kennedy School, Center for International Development. So your work is not in vain. We thank you for everything you have done. We have one last question we are going to ask you. I am going to ask you on behalf of TJK Foundation. And by the way, so you know, the editor for this channel is a girl who graduated from Nyaka, went to Makerere University, studied computer science. Rita Achanda, who I have never mentioned in any interview, but because we are talking about women empowerment, Rita is the editor who will take this, put it together, put in pictures, edit it for it to future online. From zero to now, amazing, world-renowned person. And Rita, you need to stand for office and become a diplomat. Maybe you'll be the next Uganda ambassador to United Nations and a diplomat in making. We really, really, really thank you for doing this. We ask every guest we get here. And soon, last Yunga, United Nations General Assembly 79, I was in New York. I spoke at Clinton Global Initiative. I had side meetings with Hillary Clinton, talk about women and what we are going to do in the world. We want to expand our grandmother program. I will update you in our Dallas board meeting, which is coming up soon. But we ask every guest who come here, what advice would you have given yourself if you were 18 right now? Knowing what you know and going back 18 years, which for you was yesterday. Compliment. What advice would you have given yourself at 18 years of age?
I think the advice I would have given myself is don't think you know everything because you don't. You know, I was a very smart student. I did in school. I went to university. I got a graduate degree. But I thought I was very worldly, knew everything. And I think had I been able to start from a premise where I came later in my life, which is there are things to be learned everywhere, and looking for those opportunities, being open to opportunity is absolutely critical. So that would be the advice I'd give myself, is forget what you think you know and look for what you don't know and learn what you need to know.
Whoa, that's a tweetable moment right there. Forget what you think you know and find out what
Well,
you
look for what you need to know and learn what you need to know.
Well, that is a good advice. We are going to have it on record for your grandchildren one day to come and find the record here. I'll congratulate you for being a grandmother since you left Uganda. We congratulate you for moving from Virginia to a state where you just escaped the storm, but it stays warm. Tell your husband we said hello. Tell your children we said hello, and your grandchildren. The work you have done around the world is transformational in nature. The work you continue to do around the world continues to change so many lives, and it's such a great honor and opportunity to have you here sharing these insights with our people. You can give your last word, and we will call this a closed one that will go on record to inspire and encourage more people to serve and serve selflessly, no matter where they are in this world.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope there was something there that people can find inspiring. I just am excited to watch what the younger generation is not just doing already, but is going to do. Hopefully you can learn a few things from us old fogies, but you all hold the keys to the future in your hand. Make the best use of it possible.
Come to Uganda anytime, any day. If you want to land in Kanungu to go build a home for vacation, I'll give it to you personally, and you can always be.
Oh, I keep looking. I keep thinking I'm going back to Uganda every year. It's like the plan just evaporated at the last minute. So maybe next year, finally, I will get back.
We'll make it happen. Thank you, Deb. See you in Dallas. Thank you for your services and for your many, many, many years of service. Thank you to your mentors. Thank you to your husband. Thank you to your children and grandchildren. And we thank you for the time you dedicated to us today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.